Hello and welcome back to the Halo conflict. After our brief introduction, this section is basically going to cover movement and how the characters can move and how movement is played through the game. So, to begin with, obviously, you'll need to get yourself some dice, so some 6-sided dice. You're going to need to get yourself some sort of tool that measures. We use centimetres to measure stuff, so my ruler measures inches and centimetres, but I'm going to be referring to centimetres itself. So if you can get yourself a ruler that measures both or just centimetres, that's absolutely fine. A playing surface that we've already created, obviously, and then some mega figures or vehicles, depending on what you want to use, and alongside that, a copy of the rules that I'll put in a separate video. But we're going to go over movement itself. So, as I said before, movement will use centimetres, so depending on how far which character you're using will determine how far they can actually go. So, we've got two figures here. We've got the Marine, and we've got an Elite Miner. Now, an Elite Miner will be able to move a lot further than a Marine. So an Elite Miner can go a distance of about 10 centimetres. So if we take it from the base point, he could go all the way out to 10 centimetres, which is just behind that line. So he'd be able to get all the way over here. However, if that Marine tried to move, he can only go 5, half the distance of that Elite. So the Marines are slow, they can't go very far, and they're not very accurate, but they are a cheap unit. So later on we'll go into how units are costed, but you can take a lot more Marines in reality than you could take an Elite. But that gives you a rough idea of how distance is calculated. Now, to move any figure, you've got to roll the dice before. So if we take the dice and we roll just now, it will give us the movement roll of a 3. Now, if a movement is anywhere between 2 and 5, your character can move the distance that they have on their sheet. So that Marine could have moved up to his 5 centimetres, and the Elite Miner could have moved up to his 10. Now, if we roll and we get a 1, the character can't move. So they're basically stuck. There's nothing they can do, they can't move at all. If we got a 6 though, that character will be able to move double their initial movement distance. So that Marine would actually be able to go all the way to where the Elite is, which would be quite useful. He can sprint, and that 6 also will allow him to shoot on the same turn. So he can get up to there, and the Elite would get double his distance. So from there, another 10. So you can actually make a big beeline across, and then you could shoot. So tactically, it would allow you to do a lot more than what you'd think. So there's 20 centimetres for that Elite, 10 for the Marine. Lets you really change up your play if you get a good roll for those movement phases. Now, if you're running a squad, we've got squads in the rule set that will change slightly, but if you've got a squad, they have to remain together. They will only roll 1 dice for the entire squad. So if you fail a roll and get a 1, your whole squad can't move. If you succeed, then the whole squad gets to sprint. If you're in between, obviously, the squad will just move at standard movement distance. And a really quick brief introduction to squads, they will only be able to move the distance of the shortest distance unit. So if you had a Spartan and a Spartan team, they'd all move as a Spartan, but if you had an Elite team and you had grunts with them, you'd only be able to move the distance of grunts. And just so you're aware, grunts are the exact same as Marines. They can only move the same distance, so 5 centimetres or 10 at a sprint, so that would allow for that. Now, there's one other type of movement that we can do in this phase, and that's if we roll a dice, we can declare before we roll. So you can't do this after you roll. You have to say, I'm not going to move, and you can enter what's known as Overwatch. Now, Overwatch is essentially that the unit would stay in place. If we said the Marine, we wanted to enter Overwatch, the Marine would stay in place, and anything that moved, so if the Elite was coming towards them, when they're in their action phase, the Marine could then shoot at if it comes into distance. So if this Elite comes into range of his assault rifle, and he moved, the Marine would be able to take a shot at the Elite, even though it's not the Marine's turn. So it would happen on your enemy's turn. But you have to enter Overwatch the turn before. So to do that, you need a 4 or more. So if you get a 4 or more, you can say, I want to enter Overwatch. You roll for it, there's a 6, so I get an Overwatch. That's fantastic. So you'd definitely be able to do that. You wouldn't then be able to change your mind to go to a sprint distance. You'd have to stick with your guns, even though you got a 6. And you'd have to stay on Overwatch, but it would be successful. If, unfortunately, you rolled a 3, it would just act as if you couldn't move at all, so it would act like a 1. It's a wee bit more risky, but it gives you an advantage on the next turn, used if you wanted to hold ground or stay in one position. So, tactical decision depending on the scenario of the field. So, we're going to look at different distances, as I said. So, the Elite can go to 10. Normal Marine can go to 5. An Elite Ultra can go to 12. So Spec Ops and Ultra can get 12 centimeters, so they get that little bit further. So here's a wee Ultra. Now the only difference to movement, or difference to your movement phase, would be if you then put in a specific weapon that allowed something to change. So, for example, that Ultra could be equipped, instead of with a rifle, we can swap them out, and we can pop on, this is where the pop and swap comes in super handy, could pop on an energy sword. Whether that energy sword was lying on the field or whether or not it was just brought with him, that will now allow him to add 5 centimeters of movement to his normal range, which would actually put him way over here. So if he had an energy sword, you can see how much distance he can actually cover in comparison to the other figures on the field. Now if he rolled a 6, instead of getting that 17 movement distance, he would be able to double his initial. So the Ultra does 12, he'd be able to go 24, which would be all the way out there, plus 5. You don't get plus 10 for that sword, you only get plus 5, so 24. So that would take you up to 29, so he'd be way over here. And you'd be able to almost clear the entire side of the map just in one movement, if you got a sprint. So that's with a 6. So it shows you the power of taking a tactical advantage of a weapon that makes you move faster, or a weapon that doesn't. So you can see the difference in movement there. Any questions on movement, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. We'll go over attack and action phase.